Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio as we continue to celebrate so many wonderful people across the great state of Mississippi who are working really hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. I have a very special show today, and you probably have heard Henry Barbour on the SuperTalk shows as a GOP strategist, as the managing partner for Capital Resources. And if we have time, we'll reflect a little bit about the changing nature of the political situation, not just in America, but in the world. If we have time, we'll get to that before it's over. But you may not know that Henry Barbour was the executive director for the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal. This is where I got to know him in the trenches, working hard. And what I saw in him was a terrific leader and someone who supported us, those of us who were working so hard to get ourselves out of the mess we were in after Hurricane Katrina. And with the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina approaching, I thought I would ask Henry to join me today and reflect a little bit. I'll share a couple of excerpts from my book that I'm writing, Finding Hope, Lessons Learned from Life's Difficult Moments. But without any further ado, let me welcome my friend Henry Barbour back to the Ricky Matthews Show. How you doing, Henry?
I'm great, Ricky. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the show with you one more time and reminisce about Katrina, the good, the bad, and the ugly. 20 years later, it's fascinating to think about all that Mississippi went through with Katrina and just the recovery. And have we met the expectations that I think the governor set at that time? I'm interested to hear what you think about that.
Well, I'll say right off the bat, I think that in many ways we exceeded expectations. The bottom line is we rebuilt stronger, we rebuilt safer. There's been renewal. I think if we have something to observe about the recovery effort, it's that how long it took. It took a lot longer than a lot of people thought. And for example, I had Fofo Gillage, the mayor of Biloxi, on recently, and they still have Katrina projects, infrastructure projects going on in the city of Biloxi here 20 years later. But it's the process of digging up. And it's literally like an archaeological dig as they dig up these old systems that were infiltrated by Katrina and put new, more advanced systems in place and, reduce the number of lift stations that are necessary and all of that. I mean, it's literally a completely reconfiguring of the infrastructure in places like the city of Biloxi, but it took longer. But I think that I've often quoted, I even quoted him in a recent column that I wrote about coastal Mississippi. But when Haley spoke to the special session and said, what will our kids and our kids' kids say of us? Will they say we got it? I think we can safely say today that our kids will say we got it, because you consider where we were and where we are today. And it's been a miraculous situation. But man, it was we started from a rough spot, didn't we, my friend?
It was rough. And a whole lot rougher for the people who went through it. Look, I was in Yazoo County. And actually, we had hurricane force winds all the way up to Yazoo County and almost to Starkville. It was an incredibly huge storm. And I can remember my first trip coming down. Haley had called Jim Barksdale and asked Jim Barksdale if he would chair this recovery commission. And he asked me if I would, be the kind of head staff guy under Jim, and which was an honor really to get to do it and just learn so much. But I remember Jim Barksdale and I came down, and this was 10 days or so after the storm. And we flew in a helicopter over, and it's just overwhelming to see it. And then it's even more overwhelming when you're down on the ground and you see it. And I remember we went in a meeting, and it was to be all the mayors from all the coastal communities, and you were there, and that was the first time I met you. And I just think most of the people in the room, except for Jim Barksdale and I don't think they'd slept in 10 days. I mean, it just, just the emotional, mental, physical wear and tear. And, you weren't even 2 weeks into trying to figure out, what do we do? I mean, at that point, it's tough. I mean, 230 or so people died in Mississippi. I think 65,000 houses were lost. Just overwhelming. And, I think a lot of people, and I think, Ricky, you were maybe one of them. Hey, Camille didn't get to us, so we're fine. And you found out this was a different storm, and it, really driven by the surge. It was over 30 feet high. And, just what y'all went through. I mean, I remember what you kind of telling me about what happened at your house. And, you got to, 20 years later, that's got to be like it was last night.
What's interesting about it is, since Katrina, of course, we rebuilt, and we had a house to be in after, even though it had been flooded. We had a roof over our head. That was more than could be said about so many other people. In my family, 9 of 11 homes were completely destroyed. But we since sold our house to a really wonderful family out of Louisiana, who this is a weekend home for them now. And then we built the house next door, so I can go back on my back deck when I'm telling family members who visit us or friends who visit us. We can go back to our back deck and look back at my house that we stayed in during Hurricane Katrina and point out, where the waves were and where the water was. It's pretty surreal now if you think about it, looking back. Hey, AJ Holloway, you may remember, he said something really, really important. It was quite significant. And he said that Hurricane Camille killed more people in 2005 than it killed in 1969. And the reason why is because people decided to stay in their homes based on their experience from Hurricane Camille. And, one other quick point, your point about, this wasn't just a Gulf Coast storm. It was a Mississippi storm. And as Haley pointed out in his book, it was America's storm. We hope to never see anything like this again. But I remember Haley would often use that one slide that showed, I think, Anthony Topazzi, God bless his soul, had a aerial photograph of the electrical connections in Mississippi, the lights at night, and the entire state of Mississippi was dark. So it was, while the surge was, the big tsunami that hit coastal Mississippi, the storm impacted the entire state. And, let's hope to goodness we never see anything like that again, Henry.
I hope not. But I think history tells us at some point, something's going to come along, and it'll hit maybe a different area. But what are the lessons that we've learned? I mean, what lessons were learned from Camille? What lessons were learned from Katrina? And I know with this recovery commission, Haley was really determined, and I will say Jim Barksdale was just as determined. And I think most of the people like you and the leadership, that we were going to do this differently, that we really were going to have a plan and really try to make the changes with infrastructure and how we build back, and just that we have a clean slate. I mean, so much of the Gulf Coast, literally was a clean slate. And so there was this opportunity. The tricky thing is, you realize, well, they're, private landowners, they're going to decide, what happens on their property, and is it going to be a gas station, or is it going to be something? You remember the Mississippi Renewal Forum, the charrette, as they called it. And I will say, Haley at the Mississippi Renewal Forum, he made the opening speech. And I will say, I ran Haley's campaign for governor back in 2003. And I always felt like Haley wasn't very good at connecting sort of emotionally when he spoke. He kind of sounded like an accountant to me sometimes. And, but boy, he connected emotionally that day. It was really powerful what he had to say, and it really set the tone, I think, for how we were going to come back, and we were going to bring in experts. We were going to give all the communities this opportunity to hear from these experts, and they get to decide, what's going to happen in Biloxi or Long Beach or wherever. But it's funny. Haley said, this renewal forum is called a charrette. He said, I never heard of the word charrette. He said, I don't really speak much French. He said, but I am familiar with bourbon and bonbons. And kind of a classic.
I remember it so well. So well. Such a great sense of humor. Hey, listen, why don't we do this? We'll pick it up right there on the other side when we continue our conversation. Looking back on Hurricane Katrina, but also the incredible progress, the lessons learned, so many lessons learned as we continue to visit with, at the time, the executive director for the Governor's Commission, Henry Barbour. See you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Henry Barbour. He's a managing partner for Capital Resources, but he's someone I got to know in the trenches after Hurricane Katrina. And, I think there was I once said to Anthony DePazzi that the people who were together in those days right after Hurricane Katrina, the leaders, no matter what your personal situation was, we had homes to deal with. We had businesses to rebuild. We had employees that had been devastated. I mean, I don't know how we did it, to be quite honest with you. But what Anthony and I said to each other was that there was a blood pricking that occurred. You think about the old, Little Rascals when they bonded together. We were bonded together. And if you weren't there with us, you weren't there for the blood pricking, but we still needed you. Some leaders finally did emerge weeks and months later, and we didn't hold it against them for not being able to have the capacity to be there with us. We said we could use your help. We're tired. But there was something that bonded us together that I will never forget, Henry. I mean, it was special to be there, wasn't it?
It really was. And you're right. Those early days and those long hours and just determination bonded this group. And a lot of this group, I'll say, that worked together on the Recovery Commission, we didn't really know one another, but boy, we quickly bonded and figured out. And I'll never forget, Ricky. We're in that first meeting with the mayors, and you started talking, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" I said, "Man, this guy, he's got vision, and you were a lot of energy, and it was powerful to see." And I think when you get knocked down like that, as the coast did, and so much of Mississippi, that's when you're tested, and that's when I think we saw what Mississippians are made of. And, we really did come at it in a strong way. As I think Haley used to say something about hitch up your britches. And, I can't talk like Haley, but it was so impressive to see the group come together and work well together for the good of all the coast and beyond.
Well, Henry, that meeting was so important. This was a meeting that we had. It was up on essentially at the intersection of 49 and I-10 at the outlet mall, where we set up a tent because there wasn't a place for us to have that meeting. You organized all of this. Of course, the President of the United States came, and we had supervisors and mayors and key leaders. And I mean, we all often look back to that meeting, and you will recall that as I was entering into the tent, you said to me that Jim Barstow is going to speak, Anthony Pazzi is going to speak. I think a supervisor spoke, and then Haley was going to speak. And then you said, Haley wants you to say what they forget to say, and then hand it to the president. That was my instructions. And I never will forget. I'm like, well, I haven't prepared any comments. And you said, don't just say what they forget to say. And that's what I did. And, the meeting, when you add it all up, the total of the conversations that took place in that meeting, it was a great start to where we headed with the governor's commission. And I'll never forget it. Hey, so let me share with you. I'm going to skip the first part of this is about volunteerism. And this is an excerpt from my book. It may or may not make it into the book, but it's a powerful segment that speaks to the Mississippi Renewal Forum. And this is under a segment about get your hands dirty, that what we learned is being a leader in a community is more than writing a check. It's literally about being willing to get into the trenches and get your hands dirty. And I speak to what people learned about Mississippi when they came here was very different than the Mississippi they expected to see. And we heard that over and over again. And they thanked us for being here. And that was so powerful. Then I get to this point, and this will spur some memories for you. I learned deep in my gut after Hurricane Katrina ripped through coastal Mississippi, leaving every town in ruins. Just 5 weeks after the storm, I stood in a gutted Biloxi casino at the Mississippi Renewal Forum, a 10-day sprint to reimagine what those towns could become. The Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal had been formed within 2 weeks after the storm and had us volunteer leaders working overtime. I led tourism recovery planning. Others tackled housing, infrastructure, the works. For the Mississippi Renewal Forum, we brought in architects and planners from around the world, led by architect and planner Andreas Dwani. It was a watershed moment in our recovery that took leadership, support, and extreme focus at a time when so many involved were working to rebuild businesses and dealing with overwhelming personal challenges. The real magic came from local volunteers, community leaders, and elected officials who poured their hearts and souls into the forum. We wrestled with tough stuff, new FEMA flood maps that would be coming that would bring big changes to every community. The need to have stronger building codes, new zoning that would shape a better future, rebuilding the sense of place that made each coastal community such a special place. That wasn't just planning. It was dreaming in a substantive way that created hope. We established soon after Katrina a strong will that said we could rebuild smarter, stronger, and maybe even better than before. It was a historic moment, setting the stage for the long haul while daring to dream bigger. I'll never forget the days that went into the night, some stretching to 3 a.m. when folks still at it, fueled by grit and purpose. I'll never forget the mayors who stuck it out, waiting to understand and wanting to understand clearly what it was going to take to build back bigger and better, soaking up every lesson from the committed experts about building great communities. Melanie Allen, a volunteer from Ocean Springs, said it best on my SuperTalk show, community isn't about writing a check. It's sleeves rolled up, sweat on your brow, passion in your heart, getting in the trenches and doing your part. Her words were a compelling reminder of what I saw at the forum, and afterwards, after the storm, volunteers from all walks of life. For example, the North American Baptist Men's in coastal Mississippi for years, hauling debris and rebuilding homes. Others stayed as long. All across coastal Mississippi, neighbors shared food, tools, and hope, and their callous hands supporting each other with each passing day. Each act, planting a new home, hammering nails, or passing a saw, wove us all tighter. And it goes on from there. But that brings back some memories, man. When you think about what was actually happening at the Mississippi Renewal Forum, some couldn't grasp it at the time, but over the years, you're like mixed use is becoming sort of the norm down here on the coast now. A harbor for the city of Bay St. Louis, which at the time they couldn't even get in their head, how would we ever have a harbor? Now they have it as the centerpiece of their town, and so on. What we got ultimately, Henry, from that was hope, a sense that we can actually do that, and we're surrounded by people who believe we can do that. And I can't tell you how powerful that was. It emboldened us going forward. You saw that yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, I really did. And it's interesting you use the word hope. I mean, and I think that's what people need at a time like that. Anytime there's tragedy, you want hope. You want something that you can believe in and hold on to give you the energy just to get up the next day and the grace that the Lord gives you. Um, the forum, I mean, there were about 100 architects, planners, designers who came from all over the country. This was an unprecedented event, this Mississippi Renewal Forum. It was a week-long deal. It was only about 6 weeks after the storm, which is incredible that they were able to put something like this together. And never had there been a charrette, a planning meeting to cover a whole state coast. I mean, you're talking about 80 miles of coast, and all the different cities and the city officials, supervisors, state officials, federal officials, FEMA, all these private folks. I mean, it was incredible. But as it got going, and I think there were people, some local officials who were very reticent about having a bunch of outsiders come in and tell us, what our town needs to look like. But I think the more they got into it, the more sessions and late nights and sharing a meal and helped them realize that we could build back better and differently. And in fact, that is what happened. And you look at the coast now, 20 years later, and a lot is owed to the vision that came from people like Dwani, an architect from Miami, and who's like 5 foot nothing, and pretty incredible, pretty incredible.
We're visiting with Henry Barbour, looking back on Hurricane Katrina, looking at lessons learned. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're visiting with my friend Henry Barbour, who is a managing partner for Capital Resources. They do work across multiple states, but how I know him best is that we work together on the Governor's Commission, where he was the executive director of the Governor's Commission, helping kind of keep it together, help us form it. It was a nonprofit, actually, and we got funds from both Jim Barksdale and from the Knight Foundation. I had the honor of serving as the chairman of the advisory committee for the Knight Foundation. Now, Alberto Ibargüen was a very good friend, and he not only contributed $1 million to help with the Governor's Commission, but he also helped form the Knight Center here in coastal Mississippi, where nonprofits are housed, and the great legacy that the Knight Foundation provided. But there was a lot of work. When you form a nonprofit, you got to make sure you do it right. You got to do the money in a certain way. You got to make sure the legal stuff is done it right. And then, my gosh, there was a lot of trains to keep on time as it related to this recovery effort. And Henry Barbour was the guy who did all of that, working with a terrific staff. Henry, just real quick, I'm going to share another excerpt with you, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say, looking back now, people like Anthony DePazzi and the role that he played, for him to die in the last few years of ALS. We had the opportunity to visit with him in Birmingham not long before he died. And what's interesting, when I was standing there with Anthony, his mind, of course, with ALS, it just destroys you physically, but his mind was fine, and he got an iPad, and he was wrestling with the iPad to find something. And all he wanted to show me was a picture of him and me and Haley standing together. And he looked at me with his, eyes, and you could just tell it was a very proud moment for him. But you think about Anthony and the role that he played, and then George Slogel, who said on my show that he didn't want to be remembered, that if the things he was involved with helps people come back to this place we call paradise, then he's happy. But, George or Anthony, neither one of them are with us anymore. They were such a big part of that effort, weren't they?
They really were. I didn't know either one of them before. and they were incredible leaders. They, ton of energy. George had lots of ideas about how the coast ought to come back, and we had a great group. Governor Winter was the general counsel,
Yeah.
and very much involved, and Derek Johnson, who was the head of the NAACP in Mississippi at the time and now nationally, was part of the leadership group. Joe Sanderson. We had it was a great group. Of course, Jerry St. Pay, of Ingle fame, was a huge player in it. What a strong group, and led by Jim Barksdale, who I will say, when Haley told me he wanted me to work for Jim Barksdale, I was completely intimidated. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's as good a business executive as there is in the country. So what a team. And I will say, Haley put the team together for results, not for politics. It was, how do we get the best results from Mississippi? This wasn't some Republican thing. This was we got to get the coast and the rest of Mississippi back better than ever. And how do we do that?
Henry, what was so powerful? You mentioned Governor Winter. I had, as publisher, of course, the opportunity to be in public settings with him from time to time, and they date back many years, but I never really got a chance to know him. And when we would meet together, that executive committee for the commission, he would always be there. And afterwards, he would always come up to me and put his arm around me and say, if there's anything I can do to help you, don't hesitate to let me know. And he would always say, and I mean it, I really mean it, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. He was so aware of what we were going through, and he really wanted more than just a sage raw. He wanted to do more, and he wanted to find out how he could do that. Derek, you mentioned Derek, same with him as well. I mean, he was, I think it was so wise of Haley to create a politically diverse executive committee for the commission. I think it was important that even when the going got tough and the political jabs were happening, he stayed really focused on the outcomes. He did not allow himself to get sucked into the vortexes that the politics could have created for him. And I think having people like Derek and Governor Winter involved was really important.
It was a good signal that these are the people in leadership, but it also brought a fuller discussion, and it made a big difference, and how it happened. I remember a couple of staffers, Brian Sanderson, Coastie, and Joe Cloyd and Clay Wagner were all on staff, and brought that sort of coast perspective from the staff who were I was working with on a daily basis. It's a great we had a great team, but the real difference was led by the local folks, and it was a bottom up deal. And Haley was a big believer. That's how you have real success, is a participatory type of process, and he wanted this to be. There were hundreds of people involved, and none any more important than Ricky Matthews, and by my book.
I was a member of the team like everybody else. I wrote about Marcia Barbour, and I had the opportunity to write Haley's foreword to his book America's Great Storm, and I said in there that she was his eyes and heart on the ground, and what she did in the days that followed Hurricane Katrina was unbelievable. But let me just read a quick little caption from the book. As a volunteer vice chairman of the Governor's Commission, I joined Marcia and other leaders. And Henry, you were with us. I'm pretty sure you were with us on a National Guard helicopter to go to Hancock County to meet with some leaders there. On the way, we flew over the area near the Port of Gulfport, where 1 million frozen chickens had been washed into the neighborhoods by the record storm surge, now rotting in the summer heat, and we could smell the bloating chickens from the helicopter. I'll never forget the gag reflex. And while I had seen aerial photos taken by David Purdy from the Sun Herald. This is actually the first time I'd actually seen the situation in person. I caught eyes with Marcia and both of us in tears. We landed in a baseball field, debris strewn, flooded homes all around. From there, we headed to the meeting. As we were boarding the helicopter to return to Gulfport, we realized that Marcia had slipped away and headed to a nearby homes about half a block from the baseball fields. We saw her embracing sobbing homeowners. We waited for what seemed like an hour, but it didn't matter. What we observed left us in awe. It was raw empathy on display. Who she was didn't matter. She was human in that moment. Her first lady facade was gone. That could not be more true about her, could it, Henry?
It is her finest hour, and I would say, for Haley and Marcia, it was their finest hour. And Marcia, as the storm is approaching, she insisted that she went down to how they were positioned, and you had lots of law enforcement and first responders positioned around Hattiesburg to be ready for the storm, so they could get in and try to do whatever you can to rescue and help people. And Marcia was just insistent that she was going to be positioned there. And so sure enough, she was on the coast, the minute the state troopers got in, on the 29th. And of the first, I think, 60 days after the storm, she was on the coast like 55 days. And she went to the places that nobody else went. She would take things to, people who had lost everything, and she would give them supplies, and she'd say, I've got this for you. And they say, oh, this is great. I'm going to go take it down the road to these people that really need the help. Just incredible stories. And it was really critical for Haley to be hearing these stories from Marcia every day about what she was doing out in the field, seeing people, and it helped keep Haley grounded and to understand. And I think it also was fuel to the fire for Haley when he would go to D.C. and trying to work with the White House and Congress to get Mississippi what Mississippians needed.
Yeah, she said to me 2 years after the storm, she said, I never went to the coast seeking recognition. For most of the time I was here, nobody knew who I was, and that's the way I wanted it. I mean, what a beautiful thing to say. The focus then, as now, she said, should be on those who lived through the storm, who suffered so much and showed courage in ways big and small. And man, she was scrounging for diapers and unlocking warehouses, feeding the hungry. I mean, oh my gosh, what an incredible story. So the lesson is in my book is don't judge a book by its cover. Don't just see her first lady's facade. What the storm revealed was this unbelievable human spirit that I'll never forget. And I hope that part makes it in the book once the editor is done. When we get back on the other side, we'll close it out with the amazing work that happened after Hurricane Katrina with Henry Barbour. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I hope you've enjoyed today's show as we reflect. There's going to be a lot of reflecting about Hurricane Katrina with the 20th anniversary coming up. And, Henry Barbour, who at the time was the executive director, he came in, on Haley Barbour's request to serve as the executive director for the Governor's Commission on Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewal. He has a day job as a managing partner for Capital Resources. But I saw him in the trenches when we all became blood brothers, and we'll always be in a position where we look back on those moments fondly. As tough as it was, I wouldn't trade it for anything, Henry. Having the opportunity to be in those trenches, and you know what we learned? We learned that the human capacity, the capacity of the human spirit to rise, no matter how difficult the situation, is pretty substantial. I mean, we thought we worked hard before Katrina, but man, we learned we're fully capable of so much more, didn't we?
100%. Yes. People did things they couldn't imagine. And that's because, it's just such a trial. And I think the Lord uses these trials in our lives strengthen us, and of course to bring us closer to Him. And I will say, when a hurricane's bearing down on you, you better get right with the Lord, because it's a serious thing. And but in so many ways, it does bring out the best in people. And it brought out the best in Mississippi. And I'm proud that Haley was governor. I think he was the right guy at the right time. And a lot of folks, Jim Barksdale and yourself and Anthony and Jerry St. Pé and others, were the folks at that time to step up. And now here we are 20 years later. Do we remember the lessons that we learned from 20 years ago? Do we really remember?
Yeah, I hope I'm going to capture some for sure, and hopefully that will help not just this community in this state, but other states that have to deal with it as well. Your point about it get you close to the Lord. It won't surprise you to learn the very first lesson in my book is love your family. When 10-foot waves are hitting your house and you realize where your house is 20 feet above sea level, and you realize that your community that you love is getting wiped off the face of the earth, you're just doing the math on sea level. When the busyness and deadlines of life are kind of literally washed away in the moment, you get a vivid reminder of what in life is really important. And it's life itself and the people around you. And if there was ever any moment that I felt closer to God, it was in that moment when I prayed, just let us get through this, keep us safe. And it took a day or two after Katrina for me to really understand. I have a lesson about gratitude, and I came to appreciate that as we learned after Katrina that buildings don't make a community, the people do. And then once all these physical possessions are kind of washed away, or certainly damaged in some cases beyond repair, what you get back is a lesson in life and the things that are really important to you. And, to me, in that terrible moment, God sent a message to all of us to never lose track of the important priorities in life. And I feel like we're beneficial because of that. And you saw that being expressed in so many different ways in your capacity, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You see people, like you said, just all of a sudden they get a grounding, and I do think it's a grounding they get from God. That you better figure out what matters in life, and there's fun times, but like you say, life in itself, and for me, having a Savior, this is what matters. And, begins and ends, right there.
Hey, listen, one last thing, and we don't have time to explore it, but I had no idea the amount of energy Haley Barbour was putting into his Washington effort while he simultaneously paid attention to us on the coast. And the way he did both, the way he kept in touch with coastal Mississippi and aligned incredible political leadership around the needs, the billions of dollars worth of needs for coastal Mississippi and Mississippi, was amazing. And that's why the book, America's Great Storm, Leading Through Hurricane Katrina, it should be a must read. I mean, literally, if you're going to lead anywhere in the world, if you want to see what the gold standard looks like, if you really want to understand it, whether you're a community leader, a political leader, or otherwise, you got to read that book, because that book captures it in ways nobody else has been able to capture it. America's Great Storm. Order it, read it. Study it. It is a little literal textbook on how to do it. I mean, it's true, isn't it, Henry?
It really is, and I've been fortunate to grow up under Haley and to watch and learn from him. And it's interesting, Louisiana wasn't exactly getting it right after Katrina, and if not, in my view, if not for the leadership that Haley had in D.C. at the national level, Louisiana wouldn't have gotten what
Mayor Landry asked for 250 asked for $250 billion. It created a chilling effect in Congress, and Haley had to kind of right that ship. It helped both states at the end of the day. And for me to go on to be publisher of the Times-Picayune was so ironic, given all of that history. Truly amazing. And I got to see it from that perspective as well. Thank God both states are back. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you, Henry.
Thanks, Ricky.
Thank you. It's been
Appreciate
Henry Barbour. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.